Hi guys, welcome to my channel. This is my first ever booktube and I am very excited to finally get to do videos talking about something that I'm super passionate about, which is books. Love books. I've loved them ever since I was a kid. I got in trouble a lot and was constantly grounded, which is really where I found my passion for books, because I would just start looking for series to really dive into while I was separated from my cell phone and TV and things that my mom just would not allow me to use. So I would read things like Junie B. Jones and A Series of Unfortunate Events, Goosebumps, Ripley's Believe It or Not, Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. All those amazing books and authors are people that I am forever going to be grateful for, because they helped me when I was just a really, for lack of a better term, dumbass kid. So I'm gonna just tell you guys all the things that I read this month and what I thought about them and my ratings that I gave them on Goodreads. I am a Goodreads user, so I do give ratings and reviews to books that I'm deeply invested in. Either I didn't like them or I did like them, and I give honest feedback. So I'm going to tell you guys what I felt about these books and also the rating that I gave them based on a Goodreads 1 to 5 stars. So we're gonna just get started. So the first thing I read this month was The Last Romantics by Tara Conklin, and I actually read this book with the Barnes and Noble's book club this month, and I actually went to a discussion about it, and I was very glad to know at the discussion of this book that I was not the only one very disappointed in it. This book got a lot of hype and it was you know, kind of made to seem like it was gonna be this really special all important book, and there was a lot of talk about how the author spent a lot of time writing this book and like years writing it and editing it and things, and in the end it just feels super overworked to me. Like, she spent a lot of time editing this book and it just became a little flat. Like, the more I read it and the deeper I got towards the end, I just felt like the story itself fell flat. But I did like it enough that I feel like it's enough for someone to read it once, but I definitely wouldn't read it again, and I wouldn't really recommend this book. But if you feel like you need to read this book, then I say go for it. You may or may not be disappointed, but yeah. And it's really just about a family who loses their father, and the mother just kind of loses herself, and these kids are young, like between the ages of 4 to 8, I believe, and they're just kind of like navigating what to do with a mom that's like so heavily depressed and isn't really there for them. And then they just kind of, you know, have to figure out ways to go about making life normal for themselves and getting past it. But it was kind of a very depressing book, if you ask me, and I didn't like it that much. So I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, and the reason I gave it a 3 was because I liked it enough to finish the book, which is very important to me. I finished it, but I didn't like it. The story itself, like I said, fell flat, and it just didn't do anything for me. And for a book that had so many moments that were supposed to be touching and disheartening and a little heartbreaking, I wanted to shed a tear. Okay, if it's a sad book, then I expect to shed a tear. I did not shed not one single tear during this book. Not okay with that. So then the next book I read was The Last Black Unicorn by Tiffany Haddish, And I actually really love that book. That book was probably one of the best books I've read in a long time as a memoir. It was by a celebrity, obviously, Tiffany Haddish, and I loved it. I loved it because it really had her voice. I didn't feel like it was written by someone else. I totally felt like I was sitting down having a conversation with Tiffany about her life, and I absolutely loved it. I don't have the actual physical book with me because my stepmom is borrowing it, but that's what the cover looks like. And I gave it a 5-star review and rating because I just loved that it was very authentic. It sounded like her. It didn't sound like someone else was trying to tell her story, and that to me is very important when it comes to memoirs. I love memoirs, so you guys, I just loved it. Okay, which then brings me to the next book I read, which was also another memoir by the very beautiful, very intelligent, iconic Michelle Obama. But let me tell you, Becoming is also a very, very well written memoir. This woman can write. She's very well educated. She has a very high vocabulary. I felt myself needing to take moments to pause reading this book and go open a dictionary because there were just some words in there I was not familiar with, and I was like, okay, this is Ivy League diction that I have no idea about, so let me just take a moment and go look things up. But my one downer about this book, the only negative thing I have to say, is that there was so, I mean, this book is, let's see, 426 pages long, okay? 426 pages long. Did it need to be that long? No. There were many parts that she could have pulled out of this book to make it a lot shorter, and I probably would have enjoyed it just as much, maybe even more. So for that reason, I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. If it had been a little condensed and didn't feel so fluffy, then I probably would have given it a 5 out of 5 stars, because there was just, I mean, and I really wanted to give this book a 5-star review because I love Michelle Obama and I really love this book. But I mean, it was just too long, and it was just unnecessarily too long. So then I actually read a lot of memoirs this month. I don't know why, it just kind of worked out that way, but whatever. So the next book I read was I Am Malala, which is a story about a Pakistani girl who was shot in the head by the Taliban because she was advocating for women's education in Pakistan, and that's just not really the thing to do. You know, it's unsafe for women, especially young women. And so at 14 years old, she got shot in the head, and she tells her story about what happened and how she was brought up to really think that education was important, and also discusses why, you know, having that discussion is so important, and why it's important to her, not just why it's important in general, because everybody, I'm sure, can agree that education is important, even in a world where, you know, girls aren't allowed to have an education. But she discusses why it's important to her, and I absolutely loved it. There were some fluff moments in here as well, very similar to what Michelle Obama had going on in Becoming, and for that reason I also gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars, which I really hate to do to memoirs, especially if I really like the story. But if it's just a little too overworked and it feels like there's a layer or a chapter that just doesn't need to be there, I get a little turned off, and then I have to like rate it 4 out of 5 stars, because it's like with that one chapter there, it ruined the whole story. So I went on to read The Not So Subtle Art of Being a Fat Girl by Tess Holliday. if anybody knows me, I absolutely love Tess Holiday because I love the message she sends to women everywhere about your body size and shape and just being a real badass and owning your self badassery and just, you know, living life to be the best version and most unapologetic version of yourself. And I'm just here for it. I love that message. Follow her on Instagram if you aren't already because she fucking kicks ass. Love it. So I also gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars, but the reason I did that was because this book, although well written and although the message is very empowering in here, there were some moments where I felt like I was getting advice from like a family member about, you know, like life cliches, like be the best you can be. And okay, that's her whole message. Okay, I get that. I wish that it had been told in a way that was more true to Tess Holiday and less I'm just putting it in here so I can sell books. I still liked this book a lot, enough to give it a 4 out of 5 stars, but there was just something in here that made it not 5 stars for me. And for that reason, it's a 4. The next book is actually a book that I got from my Book of the Month Club, which is a subscription service that I am a part of, where basically every month I get to choose 3 of 5 books that can be mailed to me. They give you 5 options, like 5 book options every month that you can choose from. You get one with your subscription every month, and every additional book is $10. You can choose 2 more to the one that you get. You can never choose 5, you can only choose 3. So this month I actually chose 2, but one of the picks that I got was this lovely book, Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Taylor Jenkins Reid is one of my favorite authors of all time. She wrote The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which is a great book, a phenomenal book if you ask me. That one I actually rated 5 stars when I read it. It's just so well written about a old Hollywood actress who gives an interview to this woman Monique when she is at the end of her career. The woman Evelyn ended up marrying 7 men, and she tells the story of, you know, what it was like to have that story sort of be out there to the public during her fame, and how people sort of made it seem like she was a promiscuous woman or a woman that couldn't keep a man. And she sort of just tells how that happened in this interview that she's giving to this woman Monique about her life. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. If you haven't read that book, go and buy it. The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Amazing. So I'm not surprised that Daisy Jones and the Six was also equally as amazing. This book, oh my god, I love this book. So this book follows an artist named Daisy Jones, who is an aspiring singer, and she starts her career solo, but she's no good by herself. People don't think that she really has much talent alone. And then there's also this band called the Six, and they too are really good, but people feel like they're sort of missing some sort of sparkle to make them bigger than they are. So both Daisy Jones and the Six are managed by the same person, and this guy tries to merge them together to become a great band. It's told that they're getting their stardom in the 70s, and it's an awesome story. I loved it so much. It's told in interview style, like, you know, by character. I don't know if you can see that. I loved it. I love this writing style. There's actually a Taylor Jenkins Reid book signing coming up like April 4th or something in Manhattan Beach. I'm thinking about going to it because I really want her to sign my book. I really want her to sign my book. And I may even take The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and see if she'll sign that too, because I mean, why not? When else am I going to see Taylor Jenkins Reid? Absolutely recommend this book. If you have not read it, read this. You will fall in love with it, especially if you love music, rock music, pop music. Read this book. I went on to read The Island of Sea Women by Lisa C. This is the first book I've ever read by Lisa C. I'm told though that she is known for writing historical fiction, which this one was historical fiction. I'm not really a fan of historical fiction. Loved that this book was sort of about these women who are divers, and they dive to get fish for people in their area. There's a specific name for it. I forgot it already. I read this book a little while ago. Henyo. So they're known to be the Henyo, which means that they go and they dive for fish for people in their area, and then people can, you know, buy the fish and eat it or whatever. But most Henyo, they do it for their own family, so they supply their family basically with fish and seafood to, you know, help them get on with life and all. There was a message in here about, you know, women empowerment and just a very different message as far as historical fiction is concerned, about women being the lead in the family and being the ones in charge and bringing money and things to their family. And that's one thing I absolutely loved about this book. Although historical fiction isn't really my thing, so for that reason, I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars, because it wasn't 5 stars for me because the story in itself just wasn't there. I would have given this book 3 stars, but I felt because I'm not a historical fiction fan, like a super fan, that maybe the story in itself wasn't meant for me to read. And so I didn't want to score it too low because that wasn't fair. But I read this for next month's book of or book club read with Barnes and Noble. This month's read was The Last Romantics, which was the first book I showed you. Next month, on April 9th, I believe, they're having a meetup to discuss this book. So that's why I had to read this one for the discussion. And it just wasn't really something that I would choose to read myself, but I felt the story in itself was a good enough pick that I could see why Barnes & Noble would choose this as a book selection. But I myself would never choose something like this. So yeah, sort of mixed feelings here. But if you like historical fiction and you think that women empowerment stories are something that you're interested in, I guess I would recommend this to you. I ended up reading This Is Me, or Loving the Person You Are, This Is Me by Chrissy Metz. You guys, Chrissy Metz is an absolute freaking angel, okay? First of all, look at her face on this cover. Can we not just appreciate that face? Sorry, this library book cover glare is not the business. So anyways, I loved this book. Loved it. Loved the message that Chrissy is sending. Loved hearing about her personal life and, you know, her childhood and what it took for her to get to the fame that she's achieved so far in her career. And I absolutely adored this story. I would definitely recommend this to anybody that's a fan of Chrissy Metz or This Is Us. This was just so good. So 5 out of 5 stars, absolutely. Went on to read a book that everybody's been telling me I need to read because of how much I love memoirs. Yes Please by Amy Poehler. This book, I'm not sure I really would have liked this book as much if I hadn't have read it with the audiobook version. And the reason for that is that there are a lot of parts of this book that are told by other people, like her mom and dad and Seth Meyers and a few other people that she asked to just participate in her book and narrate certain parts of it. If they hadn't have narrated it, I'm not sure it would have read the same in here. It may have even gotten confusing or just looked a little too jumbled the way it was set up in the actual book itself. And for that reason, I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars, because I'm not sure that this book would have been as strong without the help of narration. But the story itself was really good. There was a little bit of a fluff chapter, but her voice is just completely comical. Like, her actual words and how she worded things in her book was actually comical. Not that she's a comedian and, you know, she's funny that way. I meant it like her actual tone as an author in this book was spot on, and I loved it. So it wasn't a 5-star read for me, but I definitely loved it enough to recommend it and see why everyone recommended this book to me and told me I needed to read it. So there's that. Last book that I completed so far this month was a book of poetry called Inward by Young Pueblo. And I actually really love poetry, and there was a lot of poems in here in the first 2 parts that I really, really enjoyed. However, yeah, I ended up rating this book 3 stars, and the reason I rated it 3 stars is because I felt like it started to sound very fortune cookie to me. Like, it went from being poetic and strong and deep to being something that I literally just pulled lines out of a fortune cookie and, you know, was being told to, you know, stay empowered and, you know, I don't know. It was just too fluffy towards the end. Here's an example. I am at my strongest when I am calm. Okay? Very fluffy, right? Does that not sound like something you could have pulled out of a fortune cookie? I think so. For that reason, 3 out of 5 stars, because the beginning 2 parts were actually very strong, and I found lots of poems in here that I thought were very empowering and very meaningful, but towards the end it just got very surface level, not very deep, and that's not something that I really enjoy in poetry. But if that's something that you like, then this is for you. Inward by Young Pueblo. So that is it for all the books that I've completed so far. However, I am about 30 pages from finishing this book, which is Before She Knew Him. And this was my second book pick with my Book of the Month subscription this past month. Before She Knew Him is a thriller about this woman named Hen who moves next door to a man who she suspects is a serial killer. And the reason she thinks that is that years ago there was a murder that was very famous at this college, and from the murder they couldn't find the killer, and one item from the victim's home was taken, and that was this trophy. The trophy was actually spotted in the suspected killer's house by Hen because his wife invited Hen and her husband to go to their house for dinner. This book is cray, and I absolutely am living for it. living for it, okay? I'm almost done, and I'm pretty sure I'm gonna rate this book 5 stars because it has been a page turner and I've loved it since the absolute beginning. You should definitely read this book. So that concludes my video. I'm eternally grateful for everybody that has watched this so far. Thank you so much. If you have any suggestions for what I should do in the future with other videos, I would love to hear it. And my next video I'm planning is actually going to be a book haul where I get a bunch of my books that I'm planning to read next month and show you what I'm planning to read before I read it, and talk about what I expect from the book based on things that I've heard, based on reviews and comments that I've read. And then on my next end of the month book review, I'll tell you guys what I thought, what books were the most disappointing, which ones I loved the most, and I'm really excited to start this book journey with you guys on BookTube. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.